Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors PM meeting to order this Thursday, July 18th at 6:30 p.m. A recording device will be in use during the meeting. Let's open the meeting with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment for agenda items. What we would like to do tonight, since we have a conditional use hearing, which I believe will be an opening of the hearing and a closing of the hearing to another date. And we have two ordinances to consider adopting tonight that I'm sure you're here to ask questions on. So we'll hold public comment till we get to the ordinances. That way you're talking and making comments at the same time we're reviewing the ordinances. And the public comment rules for conduct established by Resolution 2001-08 includes the time allocated to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of the meeting. So let's start. The next item then is the conditional use hearing.
Thank you. This is the continued hearing on the application of Three Creeks LLC for the property they own located at 2069 Bondsville Road. They propose a townhouse traditional neighborhood development on the property. The last time this hearing was convened was on May 16, 2024. At that time, the hearing was convened and continued on the record at the request of the applicant until this evening, July 18, 2024. The applicant has again requested a continuance that the hearing be continued until August 15, 2024 at the board's PM meeting. Is there a motion from the board to continue the hearing until August 15, 2024?
I'll make a motion to continue to August 15th, 2024.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
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 And so just so the record's clear, the hearing is continued until Thursday, August 15, 2024, to begin after the Board of Supervisors public meeting, which commences at 6:30 p.m. There will be no further advertisement, posting, or notification of the continued hearing date. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meetings. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 3rd, 2024 Board of Supervisors meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Treasurer's report, authorization to pay bills and approve payroll. I have personally reviewed the bills to be paid, and I believe you have too, Francis.
I did as well.
Would you like to make the motion to accept it?
I'll make a motion to accept the treasurer's report,
I'll second.
authorizing to pay the bills and approve payroll.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And reports, Township Manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the board. I have no packet inclusion report, but I did want to say it has been a very difficult week. My thoughts are with the 24% of customers in East Brandywine Township who remain without power, and I want to take the opportunity to extend my thanks to those first responders and to the Public Works team for the work in remediating the damage from this week's severe weather. I will have a lot to say later in the agenda, so I will keep my comments to that.
Thank you. Building Inspector's report.
Shall I read that into the record?
Yes, please.
All right. For June 2024, a total of 29 building permits were issued. 1 zoning permit was issued. Fees collected for building and zoning permits totaled $51,817.76. There were 29 use and occupancy permits issued and 163 inspections completed. This report is respectfully submitted by Noreen King, Permits Administrator.
Thank you. Township Roadmasters report.
Thank you. Our newest road department employee, Mr. Matthew Hensel, will start next Monday. This hire will complete the department staff, giving us the ability to catch up on outstanding projects. We look forward to working with Matt. We continue to work with Pannoni to obtain DEP approval for the well pumping system for the new restrooms at the community park. Due to the restrooms having a drinking fountain, we are required to complete forms and obtain a non-community water system permit. Going forward, this permit requires monthly tests for coliform and quarterly tests for nitrates and nitrites. Once we have the permit approval, the restrooms will be open for business. The department personnel attended MS4 training during the June 18th Delchester meeting. The training was conducted by Center for Watersheds Protection and Lewis Environmental. Training included an overview of the MPDS MS4 permit program, good housekeeping, pollution prevention, and outfall screening. Upcoming training for the department is chipper safety and flagger training. The department has been trimming trees throughout the township. Trees were trimmed in the Cross Keys development in anticipation of our paving project. We've also been trimming some trees intersections to improve site distance safety. We continue to work with Cedarville Engineering for the replacement of the old Horseshoe Pike culvert and repairs to the lower bridge at Bondsville Mill. FEMA is completing a wetland study for Bondsville Mill prior to releasing funds for that project. And I'd like to commend the road department personnel for the hard work during the past 3 days. After the 2 storms that caused trees and wires down in the township, the department worked until Wednesday morning around 3 o'clock, and then we're back in at 7 in the morning. For the safety of the township residents and those passing through the township are our first priority, and I'd say thanks to Derek, Kyle, and Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to also add my thanks to the road department being so diligent and hardworking and working several overtime hours to make sure that the residents are safe. I appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
East Brandywine Police Report.
Good evening. The police report for the month of June, the department reported 2,516 incidents for the month. Officers conducted 205 investigations. The department had 12 criminal arrests, 0 summary arrests, 5 warrant arrests, 4 juvenile petitions. We had 8 traffic accidents. Officers issued 162 traffic citations. We issued 72 traffic warnings, and officers logged 10,757 miles of patrol. Training for the month, Sergeant Jim Ferraro and Detective Kyle Harnish finished their TASER instructor recertification class. We received 1 piece of correspondence from Downingtown School District for Officer Maureen Ray, and that is for her participation in the school district's Making Connections program. That's a program that the school district runs at all their middle and high schools, where we interact with student groups and whatnot, and Maureen is our contact person for those programs. I'd also like to echo the township manager and the highway roadmasters' comments, thanking them and thanking the fire company and the police officers. We all know it's been a trying couple days with all the trees down. I know we hit a record on calls for service. I believe we were around 40 calls for service. And together with the fire company fire department, I think we were able to do a pretty good job of keeping as many of the roads open as we could. I believe there's still some that are not completely open yet, but we're waiting on Pico. But we also want to thank the residents, because you have to have patience with us in trying to get all that done. And so I think overall, everybody did a really good job, and everyone should be commended for that.
I want to add my thanks also on behalf of the supervisors for the excellent job that the police department did. And I was not out traveling much during the storms, as you're not supposed to, but afterwards, I did see a great deal of presence of the officers, which I think was important, and monitoring and checking constantly the roads. So
Thank you.
I appreciate the effort. Fire company.
Good evening. The report for the month of June with East Brandywine Fire Company, we had 78 total incidents for the month. We had 36 total fire incidents, 42 total medical. In East Brandywine Township, we had 17 fire calls. We had 25 medical calls. We had an average of 13 personnel in attendance for each call, with major calls drawing 19 personnel. We did have slight fire damage in the township due to a shed fire at $25,000. We held 6 training events with an average of 20.6 personnel, 317 hours of training. And as everybody's said already, but the plan did work to a T with us opening up the upstairs conference center at the East Brandywine Fire Company for citizens' use. It remains open for people without power, and we've indicated what door to come in. You come in, you walk, charge whatever item you need to charge upstairs. And we did have several residents take us up on that offer.
Thank you. I will again want to thank the fire company for its outstanding service and assistance between the two township organizations and your organization. I think our township did a great job in managing a very difficult and long-lasting, that's the most difficult to me, was the long-lasting emergencies. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here from Minquist to give their report?
I don't believe so. Would you like me to?
For now,
Oh,
that's all. We're ready for you, Matt.
Great timing. You were the next person on the agenda.
All right, Matt Wagner, Minquist EMS. I apologize for my attendance. I had a issue with the station I needed to address. For East Brandywine, total calls for the month came to 41, which is 8.4% of our calls. Year to date's 206. Top calls. Top call types were ALS heart problem, a BLS fall, ALS respiratory difficulty, BLS sick person, and BLS emotional disorder. Average of call times or dispatch to en route is 1.75 minutes. En route to on scene is 7.62. On scene to transport is 16.99. Transport to hospital is 21.35, and total call time is 76 minutes. Total call out types or total call outcomes: treated, transported ALS, treated, transported BLS, and treated, transported with BLS. This month we've had 4 cardiac arrests with 2 successfully discharged to hospital. 2 successfully survived to hospital discharge without neurodeficits. And then total calls by time: 158 during the day, 86 at night, with 116 at 1:46 and 69 at night at 1:46, respectively.
Anybody have any questions of Matt? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is old business, and we have the Municipal Authority Employees Lease Agreement. Mr. Revan.
thank you. Included in your packet is a revised employee assignment agreement between East Brandywine Township and the East Brandywine Township Municipal Authority. This last appeared on your agenda on June 6th, at which point it was tabled. If you, the changes from the last time it appeared on the agenda are highlighted in yellow. They pertain to the coverage period, the date of the contract. It pertains to termination of the employee. It pertains to fourth quarter of last year compensation, and for it also, the changes include a reference to changes to the base compensation. The municipal authority considered this same record at their July meeting and voted to approve it. So at this time, I would respectfully ask the board to adopt the employee assignment agreement.
I've read the agreement, and I'm okay with it, so I'll make a motion to adopt the employment assignment agreement between the municipal authority and the township.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in
I think we
favor?
reviewed it, we tabled it, we went back over it again. It's been thoroughly vetted. I think we're good.
I think we're good, too.
Yeah.
All right. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any new business?
No.
Okay. And there are no subdivision or zoning applications. So we're going to move into item 10 on the agenda, ordinances and resolution for consideration. Do you want to give your overview first and then allow comments?
I'm going to open it first,
You're going to open it first, and then
then who's going to go?
and then we'll open it up to the public. Okay. Thank
You
you.
have before you this evening proposed ordinance 7 of 2024. This is a legislative hearing to provide information and give the public an opportunity to make comments about the proposed ordinance. Ordinance 7 has the effect, or would have the effect, of amending the maximum permitted density for clustered residential developments and amending the minimum common open space required in the R2 residential district. Mr. Revan, I believe, has a PowerPoint presentation which will further summarize the purpose of the ordinance.
Thank
I just want to add the ordinance has been properly advertised. It's been reviewed by both the Chester County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission. The Township Planning Commission recommended enactment of the ordinance. Thank you.
All right. So I know PowerPoint presentations aren't everybody's favorite thing, so I thank everyone in advance for their patience. I wanted to start with what a cluster development is. And the two boxes that you see on the screen represent the same parent parcel in a pre-development state. A conventional development would divide that into more or less equal parts and convey those to new residential homeowners. In a cluster development, a portion of the site is set aside to be reserved as open space. And the same number or more units are built on the site. Why would we want a cluster development? And the reason for this is the more efficient use of land. So for example, the shorter road means less asphalt, and it also means less sewer main or other amenities in a cluster development. It also preserves existing natural features and visual qualities of the landscape within the district. So I've just, for illustration purposes, included a wooded area or a stream or open space that could be preserved as part of a cluster development as opposed to a conventional development. The ordinance before you, and I'm going to repeat some of what the solicitor said. I'm going to do it in 3 slides. What it would do is it would increase the minimum common open space required for a person exercising their right in an R1 or R2 cluster, or R1 or R2 zone, and intending to build a cluster development that would be more required open space, from 40 to 50%. The second thing it would do is it would reduce the maximum number of dwelling units on any tract proposed for clustered residential development. Specifically, there is a multiplier that you use to take times the total tract area to produce the number of units you can build. In R2, that figure is now 0.56. If this ordinance were adopted, it would become 0.4785. In R1, it is now 0.43. If this ordinance were adopted, it would become 0.3658. In the example on the right, that would mean one less unit. So I've just more or less arbitrarily chosen a 23-acre development, and you can see that using the new multipliers, that would produce 11 units. I think what's significant about this change is that's still more units than you would have had you elected a conventional development, in which you would have had 10. I'm going to rewind back to my very first slide, so you see them side by side. The one on the left has 10 units, and the one on the right has 12. So if the ordinances were adopted, you would have fewer units on a hypothetical 23-acre development. The third of three things it would do is the ordinance would not take effect for 365 days to allow the property owners to plan accordingly for the new change. And that concludes my introduction to what Ordinance 7 would do.
All right, thank you.
So we can open it.
Yes, at this point, we'll open it for public comment. Please come up and to the podium up there so we can get your comments recorded for the minutes, and state your name and your address. So is there anybody who would like to speak on Ordinance 7? Please come up.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Watts.
Please make sure you speak into the mic.
Okay, my name's Elizabeth Watts, and I live at 404 Norland Drive. So I just have a couple questions, and it relates to, should this be adopted, any property that is adjacent to a potential rezoning area that might be impacted by the positioning of the cluster, what is the opportunity for comment and weigh in on potentially where those clusters are placed on the 23 or above acres? And what is the criteria for determining then where you would put the cluster on said property for
Well,
X
that's-
number of acres?
I believe that's determined by the property owner and anybody who has an equitable interest or an agreement of sale. And all that stuff would have to go through the planning commission and the hearings to get your approval. So it's a collaborative process involving the owners and the planning commission of the township before it's brought to the supervisors. Is that?
Yeah,
pretty much
and
covered?
I would just add that in order to get approval of a cluster development, you would have to file what's called a subdivision and land development application. So, and that's a rather complex process which involves a myriad of requirements in order to build any kind of development in the township, including a cluster development. So at that time, any member of the public would have the opportunity to comment on, I think, what you're driving at, sort of the design of the subdivision.
And with consideration for elements within the current properties such as specimen trees and
Oh, absolutely,
creek
yes.
flow and that type of thing. Okay, all right,
Yes.
great, thank you.
Even where the cul-de-sac or the road would be located, that, PennDOT pretty much controls that, so you have the proper site distances and all that stuff, so that it's a safe ingress and egress.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else would like to comment?
Bill Plank, 1119 Horseshoe Pike. What was that factor that was up there, that .43 or whatever? .47. So now you're saying a 10-acre parcel will be down to less than 5 units on that parcel. Before it was acre and a half lots. So now you're further reducing the property owner's value to get their money back.
Well, first of all, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to respond?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just, please direct comments to the chair, and the chair can recognize the appropriate person to answer the question. I just want to start with that. And then secondly, please bear with me as I make a slight adjustment to the camera, because you are a very tall man. You're out of frame. Thank you. Yes, the change would reduce the number of units that could be in a cluster development. You correctly point out that the minimum for a cluster is 10 acres, and to calculate the number of units you would have before or after, you would take 10 times the number before or after to tell you to the nearest whole unit how many units you could get. I've not done the math for a 10 acre.
10 times .47.
Well, touche. Yes, yes, it would go from 5 to 4.
Well, years ago, it used to be an acre and a half lots. So we've already lost a parcel.
Yeah, in 2014, that changed to 2.1 for a single lot.
2.1 acres?
Yes. In R2. In 2014, that was adopted.
Tom Plank, 1114 Horseshoe Pike, Downingtown. I'd like to add a follow-on question to the open space that you're proposing for these new cluster developments. Would that open space be amenable to accepting infiltration of clean sewer water that's been processed and then have to be reintroduced back into the property from where that water came from originally?
Shall I take?
Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, okay. So I simplified my presentation to just those elements of the land development ordinance that are changing. There are still other requirements, such as stormwater management. A developer may elect to manage stormwater on the sites of the houses or on the common space. We have examples of both right now. The development that's being built on Osborne Road has stormwater management on the sites that are conveyed to homeowners. By way of contrast, the development that's being built at Brandywine Walk, the development that's immediately south of our parking lot, is being built with its stormwater amenities on common open space.
So it depends how, it would depend on, you know, the various makeup of your property, the slopes and et cetera, and percolability. When it comes to sewer disposal, I think there is a preference to have it, you know, a drip irrigation, which would be discharging the water underground in the same area where it came from. A lot of our newer developments have that. In fact, isn't it a requirement? You have to have 150%?
Yeah, if I may. The requirement for drip irrigation applies to properties that are connecting to the public sewer plant at Applecross. These lots, I don't know how big they would be, but they might have conventional septic systems. And in that case, the groundwater, it is being recharged. The effluent, after it goes through the tank, is being discharged into the ground. So it would all depend on what kind of system they chose to install on a given lot. So some of these cluster developments might not be accessible to the public sewer lines.
Then it would definitely be on lot.
Right. So if they have their own septic system and sewage treatment within that particular cluster, then as far as infiltration back into the water table in that area, the open space could be used as a field for reintroducing that treated water then.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head whether it's permissible to use the open space for sanitary sewer discharge. I believe that the job on Osborne Road may have proposed that, but I don't know whether you're allowed to discharge treated effluent into the open space. Maybe Luke knows, but I don't know.
That's an engineering question.
Right.
Right,
I
you
think-
use, I have seen it recently, but I don't know, again, it's project by project.
My point is, I don't know whether the ordinance permits it. I'm not sure.
So,
May I can, Mr. Chairman, if you mind.
Yes.
There are certainly examples of cluster developments that are using their open space for treated effluent disposal. So a good example would be the Mapleview development on 322 across from Bollinger. That townhouse development, that large lot that's between 322 and the houses themselves, will be a treated effluent disposal field. So their sewage goes to the Applecross wastewater treatment plant where it's treated, and then the treated water returns and is disposed of underground at that site. And it is both a disposal area and a credit towards their open space requirements in a cluster.
all right. I'd like to ask another question in regards to
Yes, I'll give you.
the redistricting of TND 2 real estate to R2 real estate.
If I
With-
may.
Yeah, that's a different
That's
ordinance.
the next ordinance.
Okay.
Doing one at a time here.
You corrected me there, so you'll probably see me back again for that one.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Anybody else on ordinance 7?
Jose Sosa, 178 Sills Lane. Just a couple of questions about this. Open space is great, but you are adding more residents to it. Traffic is already bad enough. How many of these clusters are, I mean, obviously you've got ideas, you've got people applying to do this. If you're thinking about doing the ordinance, how many more are we kind of looking at?
I'd like to answer that first. This isn't actually in response to the survey we took 2 years ago, which we had an excellent turnout of results from the survey. We're actually reducing the amount of cars, traffic, and lots with this ordinance. And we're trying to be fair with everybody, so we're reducing it approximately in half of what it was allowed. So we're trying to make the right steps to eliminate mass developments with more housing on it.
Look, I live in the hugest one, I get it.
But this is to accomplish what you just asked,
No, I get it, and I appreciate the answer.
without interfering with the basic rights of the property owner. That's why we,
Have there been any thoughts from the township about, I've seen other townships like West Pikeland are doing it, just buy the whole plot and make the whole thing open space?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
We have an open space program in the township that each resident pays taxes into to create a fund for that purpose.
How's that fund doing?
Well, that fund's doing good. We just
Doing
need
real
to get
well. We're one of the-
participating property owners to talk to about, purchasing their properties, and we'd love to do that. Now,
Thank
with
you.
regards to this ordinance, this isn't a new ordinance. This has been in the township for quite some time, going back to 2002, the old industrial school property, the development that was done there was done under a cluster program. That was 22 years ago. So this isn't a new ordinance. This isn't an adjustment to the existing ordinance.
I appreciate what you guys are doing, I do. I just had some questions.
No, it's
Because
fine. I just was trying
Everybody
to
that,
help.
everybody that drives on 322 at rush hour knows you can't get anywhere. So,
Well, that's a whole different
Completely get
problem.
it.
So,
yeah, all right, thank you.
any other comments on ordinance 7? All right, seeing none, after working on this for over 2 years, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 7 of 2024.
Before I second it, I want to say that we have gone back and forth for 2 years on this, and there has been a lot of disagreement and argument. But I think at the end, we have a good adjustment to an existing ordinance that the township residents in our survey are asking for. So I want to second Carl's motion.
Francis, you have any more discussion?
No?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, what?
That's all right. We already had the public comment. That's fine.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to ordinance 6 of 2024.
Again, this is a legislative hearing on a proposed ordinance number 6 of 2024 to inform the public and accept public comment on the proposed ordinance. In this case, this ordinance has the effect of changing, rezoning some properties to the VC Village Commercial District. It amends the boundaries of certain zoning districts and changes the zoning district applicable to certain properties in the township and enacts a new zoning map. I have 7 exhibits that I'm going to place into the legislative record. B1 is a proof of publication of the hearing and the public meeting notice in the Daily Local News on June 20th, 2024 and June 27th, 2024. Exhibit B2 is an email dated June 18th, 2024 from Ann L. Grab to the Chester County Law Library and the Daily Local News, providing the proposed amendment for public inspection. B3 is a letter from the Chester County Planning Commission dated October 9th, 2023. B4 are the minutes from the East Brandywine Township Planning Commission meeting on November 1st, 2023. B5 is an attestation of mailing notice dated July 17, 2024. B6 is an attestation of posting of the properties that are affected dated July 17, 2024. And finally, B7 is a copy of proposed ordinance number 6 of 2024. Like the last ordinance, the ordinance has been properly advertised in this case because it involves what we call zoning map amendment. Many property owners in the township received individual letters notifying them that a change was going to be made to the zoning ordinance and the zoning map. As I indicated in the exhibits, the ordinance has been reviewed by both the Chester County Planning Commission and the East Brandywine Township Planning Commission. Our Township Planning Commission recommended enactment of the proposed ordinance. And with that, I would suggest we turn it over to Mr. Revit.
So done.
All right, thank you. Zoning is the means by which a municipality regulates the use of land and structures and the extent and character of development. Zoning, alongside with the subdivision and land development ordinance, which regulates the creation of property lines and developments of improvements to those properties, are the 2 principal means to achieve the planning objectives outlined in the comprehensive plan. I will be referencing the comprehensive plan throughout the presentation. A fundamental aspect of a zoning ordinance is the establishment of zoning districts, or just zones. A zoning ordinance establishes, in the form of text and a map, different zoning districts at different locations in the municipality. I'll be making references to changes to the township's code, the text of what's allowed, and the map throughout the presentation. So what does this ordinance do? Ordinance 6 would adopt a new zoning map. The changes to the zoning map are in 4 categories. There are changes that make the map more useful to a user, changes from it to some properties which are currently zoned R2 to R3. It reduces the size of the TND2 overlay near the Guthriesville Village, and there are some changes to properties currently zoned R3 to VC, or Village Commercial, near the intersection of Horseshoe Pike and Little Washington. Lastly, the ordinance changes the text, the township's code, for the Village Commercial District. So I'm going to go through in 5 slides the clarifications to what's different. And at the back of the room, I don't know that we had enough copies, there was an 11 by 17 printout in color of, on one side, the current map, and on the other side, the proposed map. On the left is the current map, and on the right is the proposed map. The difference I'm trying to illustrate here is that new roads and new structures have been added to the community since the last time the zoning map was updated. This is just a change to the base layer that zoning is on top of. These residents did not receive mailed notices, but it is an important reason why we need to keep our zoning map up to date. The second change is I find that the existing map is a little misleading in its depiction of the mobile home park, which shows on the existing map with the letters MHP. The mobile home park, while it shows in the zoning legend as a base zone, is actually a zoning overlay district. So without changing any of the rights allowed in the mobile home overlay district or the size of the mobile home overlay district at all, a different representation has been applied showing that it is an overlay on top of the R1 base zone. The third change has to do with depicting clusters within the R1, R2, and R3 zones. Earlier this evening, we heard a brief presentation on the distinction between a traditional or a conventional subdivision and a cluster subdivision. But in order for a resident to fully understand what they can and can't do with their property, they need to know if their property was developed as a cluster. I've selected, for illustration purposes, a section of the map that shows 2 relatively recent communities, Heatherwind West and Heatherwind East. Heatherwind East was developed as a cluster, while Heatherwind West was developed as a conventional development. And I'm going to highlight those. Note the horizontal lines on the Heatherwind East section indicating that that was developed as a cluster. So those parcels are smaller, the setbacks are shorter, the neighborhood appears more dense, but it's roughly the same number of homes that would have been allowed in a conventional development. The fourth administrative change to the zoning map has to do with adding areas that that were developed as the result of settlement agreements. We have 2 developments in East Brandywine Township that developed as a result of a court-ordered settlement agreement. One is the Estates at Dowland Forge, which at the time was known as Hillendale, and the other is the Applecross community. There are now just information boundaries applied to groups of parcels that indicate to a reader that they should be aware that there may be unique conditions governing the use of their property contained in a settlement agreement, which is not placed into the township's code. Lastly, the section of the map labeled as VE, or Village Extension, no longer appears north of the Guthriesville Village. The township had previously eliminated from the text of the township code any reference to a village extension. This change is removing the depiction of a zone that was removed through prior action of the Board of Supervisors. So that is just an administrative change. I'm going to talk about rezoning, and these changes would have resulted in notices to the homeowners. We sent 292 letters, or one of the many signs that are out in the community. And I'm going to start with the R2 to R3 zone change for an area north of East Reesville and west of Bollinger Road. Again, the picture on the left is the current map. The picture on the right is the proposed map. In order to understand the origin of this change, we need to look at one other map, and this is a map from 1999. It depicts the same chunk of land zoned as R3, and I contrast that with its current zone, which is split. That similar parcel, the parcel that is now Applecross, was part in R2 and part in R3. So a change happened in early 2000s that rezoned that parcel from its historic zone. What happened is a settlement agreement with Pulte Homes, and I've selected two excerpts of the settlement agreement that illustrate what happened. In June of 2001, the board adopted amendments that changed the R2 and R3 zoning lines in the Applecross community. Pulte took legal action challenging the changing of the zoning, and that led to comment number 21, which is down below, which reads, "The settlement plan proposes development of the property under the clustered residential development regulation of R3 residential zoning district of the township as established in the East Brandywine Township zoning ordinance and subdivision and land development ordinance in effect on the date of submission of the settlement plan, which was July 25th, 2003. And a little earlier, Supervisor Tarasky made reference to the fact that clusters are not new inventions. There's a reference to a cluster option in 2003. If you take a look at the approved land development plan, there are multiple references to the fact that this land was developed as R3. Taken the opportunity to highlight a few. Basically, the plan says that the north tract was to be developed as R3 per the settlement agreement. And in the general notes section of that plan, it says that any lands north of East Reesville will be considered the north tract. So functionally, all the properties that we're talking about rezoning from R2 to R3 have been developed as though they were R3. So in summary, in order to make the map useful for a user, a property owner in this area would need to know that, one, their property was developed per a settlement agreement. Two, that per a settlement agreement, their property was developed as R3. And three, that the cluster rules for density and lot size within the R3 district apply to their homes. And I've taken three things from the legend of the proposed map, namely the new drawing around the settlement, the yellow representing the R3 district, and the horizontal lines representing that it was developed as a cluster. So that is why the sections of west of Bollinger and north of East Reesville are proposed to be rezoned from R2 to R3. Second change that necessitated notice to homeowners has to do with the traditional neighborhood development, or TND2 overlay district. The illustration on the left shows with crosshatching what the TND2 district was on the current map, and on the right shows what the TND2 district would be if the ordinance were adopted this evening. So what is the TND2, or traditional neighborhood development? The TND2 overlay was created as part of the Guthriesville Master Plan in about 2014. The TND2 overlay allows additional development opportunities, including higher density housing, beyond those of the underlying R2 and R3 districts. The intent of the TND2 overlay was to complement and improve the vitality, economic strength, and appearance of the village, the Guthriesville Village core area. Why are we proposing changing the boundaries to the TND2 overlay? In 2022, Board of Supervisors adopted a new comprehensive plan for the township. The plan, developed with extensive community input, highlighted a fundamental conflict between two priorities of the township: to encourage investment in the Guthriesville Village and to preserve open space. The particular finding of the comprehensive plan, marked here as GV1, recommends that the township reassess the TND2 overlay, which is what this ordinance would do. The third change that necessitated notice to homeowners is the changing of 4 parcels in the, at the 5 Points intersection, basically Little Washington and 322, from R3 to Village Commercial. Similar to the last one, the last change, I'll say, well, what is the Village Commercial District? The Village Commercial District is intended to reflect and support properties and their extensive existing uses in the Village of Lindell and to provide similar opportunities at other commercially developable locations, and to assure that new uses or changes in use are largely compatible with the traditional compact neighborhood commercial character and complementary to adjacent residential uses. Unobtrusive transition to the surrounding residential district is to be achieved. The district seeks to appropriately provide for and manage current and future business uses, including mixed-use opportunities. One purpose of the VC district is to accommodate development which maintains and/or creates a cohesive sense of space not dominated by large expanses of parking. It provides for the development of complementary mixed uses, including residential uses, as well as small-scale commercial, service, and employment-oriented development, while discouraging single-story strip development. Why contemplate changing the boundary of the Village Commercial District? Similar to the rationale for the TND2 change, in 2022, the Board of Supervisors adopted a new comprehensive plan for the township. The plan, again, developed with extensive community input, included the following recommendation, marked as FLU3. Consider opportunities for additional commercial uses at the intersection of Route 322 and Little Washington Road. While the township has limited commercial, there are some areas where additional non-residential development may make sense given the surrounding land uses. The intersection of 322 and Little Washington may be one such place, as there is existing commercial development on the west Brandywine side of Route 322. The township could consider adding some small-scale commercial here that would increase the diversity of neighborhood services and options. That concludes my summary of Ordinance 6 of 2024.
Thank you. I appreciate the audience of our residents taking the time to understand. It's quite a complex issue, and that's why we spent a lot of time on it. So at this point, would anybody like to comment on Ordinance, what is this, 6?
Good evening, my name is Joe Coretta. I live at 124 Little Washington Road, which is one of the parcels that is designated to be changed from R3 to VC. So as a property owner that has lived there 10 years, what does that mean for me?
Mr. Revin, you want to give him the...
All right, so residential uses are allowed by right in the Village Commercial District. And if this ordinance passed, nothing immediately would change, except that you or future owners of your parcel or the other 3 parcels so affected could put commercial uses in those lands. But I didn't get into the specific densities or controls. I just focused on the intent. The intent of the commercial, if installed there, would be small scale and respectful to surrounding residential uses.
The residents is overwhelmingly in the survey wanted to know why there isn't more commercial space or opportunities. Well, 322 is very difficult. In the Guthersville area, between traffic problems, lots of feeder streams, ecology of that area, there's little opportunity to do much more than is there. So in order to have some additional opportunities for commercial, and we're talking, you know, whatever, a farmer's market, restaurant, whatever is appropriate, we needed more space. So the supervisors picked out this area because right across the street from you, it's all zone commercial anyway. You're going to have commercial property there sooner or later. So it seemed to be a good place to put some more commercial area on a main feeder road. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I understand what you're doing, but as a homeowner, like, let's say.
You don't lose your rights that you have now.
If I may,
Yeah.
you can continue to use your property the way you're using it today for as long as you want to.
Okay.
It doesn't affect you at all. In fact, it just gives additional
options.
opportunities.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask. So if I was to sell my property at some point, I could now sell it to someone looking to live there or someone looking to develop?
Yes.
Okay. But how does that, does this affect property taxes in any way, you know, with this change?
Not until something's developed.
Not until something's built or developed.
Okay.
You don't get taxed on a what if.
Well, I understand. But in terms of property value, you know, someone wanting to buy our home to live there now has to consider that it's actually zoned for commercial and not residential? Like, does it impact?
That's up to them, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's difficult
So-
to answer.
Right, and they're going to have the same questions whether you're zoned or rezoned. Because of the commercial, it's already there and is coming.
Okay, last question, if I may. So is there any current plan, is this being adopted for some
No, there's
commercial development that's
we
in
have
the
no
works?
applications or inquiries about putting something on that land. And it has its own environmental problems too, because you have some streams there and
Yes.
stuff. And that's going to limit a lot of what can be done.
May I have one more question? Well, I'm sorry, so if we did not want to sell our property, but one of these other adjacent properties that are now zoned for commercial wanted to sell to a commercial developer, then potentially something could be developed around us where we sit right now.
That's a possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Plank?
So you're voting on tonight only the shaded areas on this exhibit map, or are there other areas that you're voting on that this will
That is,
encompass?
that is the new comprehensive zoning map, correct, Luke?
But we're also, the ordinance also affects the uses and the regulations in the VC district. And it also, lack of a better word, eliminates the TND2 for certain properties. And as Mr. Revan explained, it also aligns the zoning map with how certain properties were actually developed.
Based on court settlements.
So you're saying the two TND2 parcels on the McCausland Farm Tract are going to R2? Is that what you're saying?
May I?
Yes.
chime in? Okay, so they were already R2. TND2 is an overlay district. So the TND2 overlay district on a portion of the McCausland tracts is going away, yes. What remains there is the final phase of Applecross and the current Stone Mill Village development that was on the McCausland tract, as well as the Fisherowski tracts. That remains in the TND2 overlay.
And you're saying there has to be a plan in 365 days, or that doesn't even apply to us because you're saying that we weren't technically TND2 theoretically with those two parcels? Is that what you're saying?
This ordinance would take effect in 5 days.
It's a small section.
It's important to note, though, that most of your parcels, there is no change. No, there is no change in most. No, no, but the value hasn't changed. There is no change in most of your parcels.
You just said that you're going from a .53 down to a .47.
That's a different ordinance. We're dealing with this.
You're reducing the value of a property. But you can't get the same amount of home sites or whatever in that property because you're reducing it.
That's speculation because the changes. No, it's not. I've developed properties, and yes, if you lose the value of a home site, there's other ways to make up for it, such as a cluster, or,
Well,
You just said you're reducing your cluster.
it's a minimal reduction.
It's
that-
still a reduction.
All right, well, it's not the proper place to debate, but I'd be happy to meet with you to explain it to
Mr.
you.
Mr. Chairman, may I also
Yes.
chime in? I don't want to get into a discussion about individual real estate matters. However, I would point out, and it was brought up earlier, that the township does have an open space program that is well-funded, and any party that is interested in selling the development rights to a parcels 10 acres or larger would be welcomed if they approach the open space committee to do so.
One more call for comments.
In conjunction with that comment,
Go ahead.
I would like to add that the Open Space Committee is done research on doing outright purchases of properties. And we are about ready to release a program that's going to would allow us to be as competitive as a developer in some applications and in some instances for the open space. This is something that hadn't been considered in the past, but we are now looking strongly at that to try to do something productive on some of the final properties.
Come on up.
I'm Deb Fouts. I live at 85 Locks Farm Lane.
I'm sorry, what was that?
In the Village Towns. Deb Fouts, 85 Locks Farm Lane. Is this the microphone?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, number one, we did not receive anything, and this would impact us, I think, a lot. I'm curious why no one in the Village Towns received any kind of notice.
I apologize. I do wear hearing aids, but your voice is so soft, I'm not
Okay.
able to pick you up. Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, I live in the Village Towns, and I'm curious why, first of all, no one in our village, in our little community received a letter when the one zoning change in the TND2 would impact us.
If I may?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Luke, go ahead.
I don't know that I can zoom in on that, but there is actually no change in the village town. Prior to, as of this moment, Village Towns is in the R2 base district with the TND2 overlay district applied, and that development was developed with the conditional use bonuses associated with the TND2. Furthermore, if we adopted this ordinance, those same conditions would still be true.
Okay, so there's really no changes then?
Well,
To that?
No, it is important to note that the areas of the TND2 overlay district are getting smaller. That does not include where you live.
Okay, so, I'm just curious why that has to be done in that area. What's the proposed plan? I mean, what eventually do you plan on doing with that area that you need to do this, is my question.
Shall I do again?
There's no plans, there's no secret stuff, there's no every 10 years you have to update your comprehensive zoning map.
Okay.
That's a plan, that's evidently a state requirement. And we received the grant for it, and we studied it for several years as part of the survey. So most of the changes here, Luke went over, Mr. Evan went over in detail, and most of them, and most of the people got a letter because simply their property was developed under a court settlement which trumped our zoning.
Okay.
So if, I don't believe there's any change where you are.
Okay. I do want to make a comment about I did take that questionnaire about the community input, and I just wanted to mention that it's very, I'm not going to call it deceptive, but you need to put some definitions. When people fill that out, it's very confusing to know exactly what you are proposing when you answer the questions. A lot of people don't know the definitions of a lot of...
But we weren't proposing anything. That was to gather information, and it was done by a professional company. Where were they, from Texas or something? Or
Well, my point is...
not something
okay,
that we
yeah.
prepared.
Okay, but you still could, for the benefit of your community, have them or yourselves add some definitions so that people understand what they're agreeing to. And
They weren't agreeing to anything. It was simply,
I know
what would you like
okay,
changed? Or
right.
What
But
would you like to see improved?
exactly. I know what you're saying, but of course. But you still are making a decision on what do you want to see changed. And if you don't really understand the definitions, then you're not really understanding what kind of changes you're being asked.
But you didn't know
decide
when you
on.
did the survey. That's
I'm
why you
sorry?
got, we didn't anticipate what the changes might be presented to us when we did the survey. The
That's
survey-
not, no, what I'm
Yeah,
saying
d-
is, when you get a survey, you should have definitions on the survey, so that when people are filling it out, I'm not saying you guys did this, I'm saying going forward, when you send out questionnaires, it would be helpful to put definitions on there so that people understand what it is that they're being asked,
Right, thank
what
you.
they want for their changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Carlos Morales. I'm at 83 Locks Farm Lane, also in Apple Cross. I don't even know if this is relevant, but just looking at the fact that the TND looks like it got a little bit smaller. I mean, we have a subdivision that's being built right now, and a lot of open space is now gone, which I get, there's property. I'm actually at the end that actually overlooks the little piece left of the forest, if you will. And I wanted to know if there's anything that's gonna change with that is reflective here, because that would significantly impact me. There's streams, it could be runoff, there's a lot of things, and it's hard to anticipate when is the right time to comment looking at some of these maps. So I don't know if there's an impact, if there's something that, with the open space, that something's I think maybe that's one of the things. She's like, hey, what's gonna happen with that space? Because we used to have a lot of open space. Now that's all that's left of the open space. So we're just trying to get a feel for what the plans are with the township with respect to that.
There are no plans. There is nothing secretive here. We have.
No, I'm not implying that something secretive might be something I don't know. If it's not impacted, if this is not the right place, all I know is I'm right there, and there's a map, and I have no idea if there's a question I should be asking or not. So I want to make sure that, hey, according to this map, nothing is going to change with respect to what's in place right now.
Luke, you want to
Well, sure. First of all, I want to establish which current subdivision we're talking about, because there's more than one. If you are in the village towns, I think you're referring to Stone Mill Village.
Yes.
The land development to your east.
Yes.
All right. That development is on 2 parcels, and those 2 parcels will remain in the TND2 base zone with the TND2, I'm sorry, the R2 base zone with the TND2 overlay, and it does not affect their development at all. That development is 89 homes and is being built at a higher density than would be allowed under the base zone of R2. The township created the TND2, which includes a density bonus, with an idea of revitalizing Guthriesville Village. And that is the way your neighborhood and the neighboring neighborhood were developed. Higher density than would otherwise be allowed in the R2 district. When we do the surveys of the comprehensive plan, it's not about specific locations. It's about getting resident feedback on what they want to see. And we heard 2 things very loud and clear. 1, preserve the village. 2, preserve open space. And so the township finds itself with 2 public policy tools that are diametrically opposed to each other. Want to see development in the village, want to preserve the farmland adjacent to it. That's why we do a comprehensive plan. That's why we solicit the feedback. And the ordinance that the board is considering tonight is trying to balance the 2.
You missed the 3rd one, which is traffic.
Well, traffic is always the number 1 complaint. So, but for the TND2 district, both your neighborhood and your neighbors, the one that's being built, would not be as dense as they are.
Right, under the new plan that you're going to be having.
Well, the TND2 district will still exist, but it no longer covers sections of undeveloped land in the vicinity of your home.
And will that area be maintained open?
It is private property.
Private property, it's just the landowner decides that.
Yeah, they have the right to develop.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw somebody else wanted to speak.
I was going to say something, but those are covered.
Anybody else? All right. I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 6 of 2024, amending the boundaries of certain zoning districts.
I'll second.
Do you have any further discussion, Francis? Yep. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comment. Well, before we get to that, I want to thank the public for coming tonight, asking questions. We wish we had crowds like this every time. This is something we've spent 2.5 years on. Nothing's ever perfect, but we think we're making it better. And in another 8 years, we'll start the process over again and make it better again, we hope. So, but again, thank you all for your comments. They're much appreciated. All right, public comment on non-agenda items. Notices, there was an executive session held on July 9th, 2024 to discuss real estate matters. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all again.